Imagine Hajar. Hajar has been a social worker for more than 13 years. Every day she sits in an uncomfortable office, the whir of a broken air conditioner in the background, trying to help people. Today, Sarah, a mother of 3, comes to her, desperate for help, trying to leave an abusive situation. Hajar wants nothing more than to build a connection with Sarah, to brush aside the contents of her desk, to sit beside Sarah, to offer a cup of tea and build a genuine connection. She knows in the long run, that's what will really help Sarah. Instead, what she must do is ask question after question, succumb to the bureaucracy of the nonprofit complex. She asks Sarah, how much money do you have? What's the nature of the abusive situation? Have you contemplated suicide? After 30 minutes of unrelenting questions, she realizes she can't help Sarah. She has to tell Sarah to go somewhere else and to do this process again. She wonders if Sarah will even bother. How effective is this? How must Hajar feel? Worse yet, how must Sarah feel? What do we want most when we're in need? We want help. That's obvious. But I think the question we want to be asking is, how do we help the helpers? As someone who works and serves in a social service organization, it's the question I ask. Am I part of perpetuating an unjust system that forces people through unrelenting hoops and a system that doesn't work for them? We built Transform, a digital assistant for frontline workers. Transform triples the amount of time staff spend with clients. It's a product that's in use today, and this is what people have to say about it. It was simple to use. It was easy to navigate and more efficient. It's the first time that the tools I use actually align with the trauma-informed approach I learned about in school. Investment from the mayor, an incredible ensemble of partners who helped us build it and who are waiting to use the product. But I'm not here to talk to you about what we developed. I want to talk to you about the future of social work and what it can look like, and what are the 3 big shifts we need to make. The first shift is a culture shift. How do we move from a culture of bouncers to guides? And don't worry, I'll tell you about each one. The second, how do we move from 19th century to 21st century communication? And the third, how do we move from subjugating with data to motivating with data? So that first one, how do we move from bouncers to guides? Now, imagine Hajar and Sarah again. We force Sarah to go through endless loops of repetition, telling her story again and again, being re-traumatized. Elegance and beauty isn't part of how we've designed the system. We force frontline workers to check the level of deprivation of someone and meter out a scarce resource. This is a bouncer mentality. What if we instead oriented social work around welcoming? What if social work felt like going to your favorite coffee shop? What if it was about meeting someone in the space that was most comfortable for them? Meeting them in a gurdwara or a coffee shop or a mosque. Instead of staring at the back of someone's screen, what if you took out a phone and together you answered questions dynamically? What if instead of feeling like you were metering out a scarce resource, you were trying to open as many doors as possible? This is what elegant design can help us do. Elegant design can change the paradigm from one of metering out a resource to opening and finding options. Second, how do we move from the 19th century, where we expected people to come to us to make an appointment, to visit us on our terms, to the 21st century, where we expect information to show up in front of us, where it should be in our YouTube feed, where it should be automatically suggested to us? How do we move to that sort of orientation? And why is this important? Well, 96% of social workers want to text the clients. They want to text the people they help. Oftentimes, they're told not to, for very good reasons. Organizations are afraid of workers making commitments that they don't know about. They're afraid of blurring personal and professional boundaries. They're afraid of many things that are legitimate fears. But instead of being afraid of embracing people, we need to meet them where they're at. 0% of the tools in the sector actually embrace omni-channel communication. Now, what is omni-channel communication? It's the ability to meet people in the platform they're on, in the language that they prefer, and in the medium that's most effective. And so, sending an Arabic message to someone in Facebook via a voice message. Why is this important? Well, 20% of female refugees who have come into this country don't read their first language. When we think about public health messaging to date, oftentimes it focuses on translating a poster, hoping someone prints it out, hoping they'll put it in some place that people will see it. But what this data tells us is that won't even help a lot of the people we're trying to reach. But what is interesting is smartphone usage in the same population is over 90%. And people who lack first language literacy are still finding ingenious ways to communicate. They're using voice notes, they're using other mediums, and they're hyper-connected. We're just not meeting them. Imagine if Hajar had a tool that allowed her to connect meaningfully to all of her clients. Imagine she wanted to send a message to Sarah. Sarah, can I help you sign up for a bus pass? That message got translated instantly into Punjabi. And then Sarah could reply back in Punjabi, have it translated back into English, and they could converse that way. Imagine if Hajar could do this for all of her clients at once, have it translated into Arabic and Yoruba, and have all those messages come back into one place. Imagine the anxiety of having to navigate 4 or 5 different platforms being reduced for Hajar, and automation helping people find answers. Third, imagine what we could do if we motivate with data. This is the industry-leading tool, and when you look at this tool, you probably feel anxious. I know I do. Now imagine if you're a social worker and this is your relationship with data. It's one that actually makes you want to procrastinate, makes you want to do less, makes you afraid. I'll give you an analogy that I think it might help. Imagine you want to see how a kid is doing at school. And you go and you talk to the social studies department, and the social studies department tells you, we need 90 days notice and a written letter from the principal. And the math department tells you 7, but they won't tell you if 7's good or bad. And the phys ed department gives you an emoji, but not a clear emoji. How do you feel? You probably feel pretty confused. Worse yet, imagine the high school your kid wants to go to that's across the street has a totally different system for measuring. Now, this is the state of the nonprofit sector, of collaboration in the sector. We all use different ways to measure, and because we use different ways to measure, we actually can't serve people well. 20% of social work time is spent on human interaction. More than half of the time is spent on administration. I have the privilege of knowing a lot of social workers, and I can tell you not one of them, not one, went into it for admin. Data requests are often driven by funders. They're not driven by a motivation to help the actual client. It's work we do to prove that we're worthwhile. And this undermines our ability to focus on the client. Data justice, or data sovereignty, is a very important concept we need to embrace. Data sovereignty means giving control of data to the clients, realizing that the data is theirs and we want data to serve them. Data can also help us have a different relationship. Data can be used to anonymize people. Jacob is client 375, or Jacob is a father of 3 and a renal surgeon. Those small little tweaks allow us to build relationships. Data traps are things we inadvertently introduce into systems. So you might have a well-meaning engineer who says, hey, I'm going to design a system for this nonprofit. And of course, phone number is going to be a mandatory field. But then when a social worker encounters someone who's between phone numbers, in order to get between fields, they put a whole bunch of errant numbers just so they can finish the entry. And then forevermore, we have compromised data. An alternative to this is giving social workers the option to add a note or remind them to ask this question at a later time. And when we put empathy into our systems, we design better systems. And ultimately, most importantly, we really need to focus on goals. Our data shouldn't be driven about proving our programs. It should be about the goals our clients have. If we know someone's coming to us because of housing security, we want to be able to measure their progress in housing security. And when we collect data in this way, we also have this incredible opportunity to motivate and track the progress of the people we work with. When our frontline worker helps people navigate evictions and they hit a certain threshold, they hit 10 evictions prevented, they should get a badge or a credential that follows them on LinkedIn and other places, that their coworkers can go and say, hey, so-and-so is the housing eviction champion. Go to them when you're looking for advice. This is a way that's simple and powerful to remind people of what they're achieving. Now, social work is an incredibly demanding occupation. Oftentimes in it, we only hear of negative story after negative story, and that can lead to frontline worker burnout. Small tweaks, like just reminding people about the number of goals they've helped people achieve, is important to keeping people in the occupation and keeping them happy in it. This is a small part of what Transform does and what a holistic ecosystem does to support people navigating social services and support the frontline worker. When data collection helps the frontline, we all win. I want you to imagine Hadra and Sarah again. They're meeting again after some months. Hadra can see the tension in Sarah's eyes has alleviated. When they're talking, it's less stressed. Hadra is able to ask Sarah just a few questions and say, hey, I have a few more options for you. I think these things might help. After their coffee, she's able to say, hey, I'm going to send this data to the next organization. So you don't have to say anything, you just have to show up. Now imagine how Sarah feels, how prepared she feels for the next step, just because data's been collected in a better way and because Hadra feels better. Again, those three lessons, the lessons for the future of social work, is the cultural shift. How do we help our frontline workers move from being bouncers to being guides? The second is the infrastructure shift. How do we move from 19th century infrastructure to 21st century infrastructure? And third, how do we move from subjugating with data to motivating with data? Now, what can we all do? Now, if you're not in social work, you're not in a social serving organization, what's the key message? Well, I think one of the things we should all do is we should ask to measure flourishing. We should insist on measuring the things that matter. How many goals did you help people achieve? We don't want to know how many people came through a door. We want to know what happened as a result of them coming through. Second, we need to demand data justice. Anybody who comes to a social service organization, be it government or whatnot, should be allowed to move their data. That should be a requirement. And third, we need to let nonprofits lead this work. The organizations that are at the front line need to be driving data requirements, and if they do, that'll lead to better service. Thank you.